We're proud to announce today that the National Science Foundation has awarded a total of $1.4 million for 2 grant projects, NC Share Science DMZ and NC Share Compute as a Service. Those projects will provide high-speed research network capacity, support high-performance computing, and boost STEM education to minority-serving and smaller institutions of higher education throughout North Carolina. This is a big deal for us. Duke's partnership with the North Carolina Shared Research and Education Collaborative, or NC Share, is one of the ways the university is forging purposeful partnerships in the region to advance research and innovation. One project will establish a dedicated science network infrastructure to interconnect campus researchers on top of MCNC's high-speed, high-bandwidth network. The other will leverage that same MCNC network and some of Duke's capabilities to make computation and powerful software environments quickly available to researchers, educators, and students. The goal is to create a shared, virtual, high-performance network, storage, and compute infrastructure housed at MCNC to enhance research and education in the region.
For over 40 years, MCNC has been a trusted collaborator offering technology solutions and advanced networking to connect North Carolina. MCNC is excited to be involved in this project because we are the research and education network. This project emphasizes the research contribution of MCNC. In addition, this project is especially meaningful because it meets a vital need of our education community.
This virtualized approach increases the accessibility of high-speed, data-driven research by democratizing access to advanced cyber infrastructure, enhancing research productivity, promoting collaboration, and reducing the time required for scientific discoveries. Similarly, the shared computational infrastructure delivers higher-end science resources to smaller, lesser resource institutions than they might otherwise be able to afford. At Davidson, this means we can give more faculty and students, more courses and research projects, access to next-level computing resources for their work than ever before. And it means helping inspire faculty to discover new tools for data analysis and research to prepare our students for lives of leadership and service. Why join? As a regional resource, the costs are lower, and it requires fewer local on-campus technical support personnel to provide this service to your faculty and students. By next year, we hope to develop and build the network for Davidson and North Carolina Central University to use, launch a community of practice for our faculty, and begin to use shared computational resources to support classes at both institutions. By 2024 and beyond, we'd like to grow to add more institutions and to serve as a model for other state and regional virtualized science DMZs, creating a pathway to more cost-effective and accessible solutions for other institutions.
I'm really very happy with the award that we have received on this NC Share partnership, which is really important for NCCU. It will provide that much needed infrastructure at a minority serving institution, an HBCU like NCCU. We have kind of perpetuated these inequities by not funding these institutions at an adequate level, as we have kept on advancing technologically. So this is really very important for Central. My institute and my own research focuses on health equity, and interrogating such data in an efficient way is very important, for my own research. So I'm really looking forward to having this infrastructure in place.
All right, we're going to do a quick round of introductions from our PIs, and then we'll get right to the content. Tracy, would you like to start us off?
Sure thing. Hi, I'm Tracy Feuthy, Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Duke University. I'm pleased to welcome you today to our short informal session. I'm the principal investigator for the NSF award called NC Share DMZ, and you'll learn more about that today. I'm also co-PI for NC Share Compute as a Service. And we'll talk about both of these today, and we'll sort of blur the lines a little bit between the two projects. That's because we really see them as both mutually reinforcing, and both of them have relatively few barriers to entry. So each of us on who will be talking with you today is associated with one or both of the awards. So Charlie, you're next up.
Hi, I'm Charlie Neifel. I'm CTO at Duke University on the university side, and I'm the PI on the Compute as a Service grant. And we'll be giving some more updates about what the hell is a Science DMZ and a few other things later on. And Tracy Dokes, you're next.
Hi, my name is Tracy Dokes. I am the other Tracy. I'm the president and CEO of MCNC. Many of you may know who we are because we're the North Carolina Research and Education Network. I am a co-PI on the NSF grants, and we consider ourselves the plumbing of this project. And I will pass it off to Lee Kress.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Leah Krause. I have the pleasure of serving as the Chief Information Officer at North Carolina Central University. You met my colleague, Dr. Kumar, who's unable to make it this afternoon, but we both have the pleasure of serving as co-PIs on these grants and are looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have this afternoon. And I will turn it over to Kevin.
Thanks, Leah, and great to see everyone here today. Kevin Davis. I am the Chief Information Officer at Davidson College. I'm so pleased to have had this opportunity to work with a great team from Duke, NC Central, and MCNC on this really important grant opportunity. I'm a co-PI on both the DMZ and Compute as a Service grant, and really looking forward to connecting not just with faculty and students here at Davidson, but throughout the small private colleges and universities and minority serving institutions in the state to help us grow adoption of this great resource. I'm going to hand things back to Tracy Dokes now to start talking to us about what's being done now at MCNC to get this underway.
Yes, and as you heard before, MCNC is thrilled to be a part of this project because of the R of the NC-REN portion of what we do. Not only do we think this is important for our education community, but especially for minority serving and smaller institutions, that they can avail themselves of the same resources as the larger ones, and that is part of our mission. This project runs on the NC-REN, or Research and Education Network. The Science DMZ establishes this parallel science network infrastructure that connects researchers to external sites with a speed and style of connectivity that you see typically only available at the large research institutions. And then, of course, the Compute as a Service will dovetail that work by creating this shared computing environment. So as I mentioned before, it's running within MCNC's data center. So far, we have run the first 2 physical connections to the shared DMZ equipment, which also feeds Compute as a Service infrastructure. The first connection to the primary IP path has been completed, and the second is the out-of-band path that we have just recently completed. We've provisioned and handed this connection off to Duke for testing, and the second IP connection will be available in about 2 weeks, if not sooner. And with that, I will hand it over to, I'm trying to remember who am I handing it over to.
How about Kevin?
Kevin, yes, handing it over to Kevin.
Thanks, Tracy. So as we think about getting underway with the consortium, our team here is really excited to be starting to pilot some of the services available both on the Compute as a Service and the DMZ side. Electronic lab notebooks, which are one of the primary use cases for Compute as a Service, have only been available at Davidson in sort of a pilot program for the last 3 years. And we've seen tremendous interest from our faculty, particularly in STEM courses, in making software like R and Python available through frameworks like Jupyter Hub. So we're really excited about what Compute as a Service will offer to our pilot courses and then to other courses in faculty as the cluster becomes live and in production. So we're starting conversations now with our faculty about pilot use cases and being able to move our workloads into the NC Share cluster. We're also working with partners that have been identified with Duke's help to review solutions for federated identity, ways that we can bridge our various authentication systems to work more closely together. For instance, today we have a faculty member at Davidson whose lab, including their student employee or student researchers, work closely with Jefferson National Laboratory. But today we have to create accounts on both sides at Davidson and JNL to facilitate that research. We're really looking forward to identifying and standing up identity federation services through NC Share to help make use cases like that easier to accomplish. And finally, we're beginning to prepare to connect our campus research computing cluster to the Science DMZ after some of the initial work at Duke and NC Central. And as our faculty are beginning to already think about future needs they have for maybe a small departmental cluster, we're encouraging them to start thinking in ways about how they might be able to use and leverage NC Share as it grows to better multiply those investments and think about working within a state framework. So we're very, very excited about the possibilities and the chance to really multiply what we can do as a small institution through the help of our great partners and this great consortium. I'm going to hand things next to Leah to talk about the progress being made at Central.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm gonna throw a little twist in this because I think that it's great to kind of start listening from what Tracy D is saying. You get a little higher level hearing what Kevin's saying. So he already has use cases. He already knew from his faculty. When this idea started at NCCU, we were trying to get our faculty to talk to us, but they were like, oh, you know what? We don't want to bother you, right? So we had a hurdle to cover just at the beginning of that, which is to find out what those use cases were. We thought we might need the Science DMZ thing, and we thought we might need the shared compute thing, but we had some work to do internally. We're a little bit larger than Davidson. And so for us to get our arms around this bear, if you will, was really important. Dr. Kumar, who is not here today. He's actually in India. And he brought forward the researchers. He brought forward, we have two really high-end science research institutes, both of them focused on health disparities. They were still using a football hard drive and carrying it to places to do the research. We were, in many instances, not the PIs on some research grants, but the co-PIs on research grants. And we knew that there were these gaps in what we were able to deliver from an IT infrastructure, which I then learned was called cyber infrastructure, which is not cybersecurity. So I got some education as part of this as well. And part of what we wanted to do today in this info session was to explain what we're building, but also make sure that you all understand that no matter where you are on this continuum, that we want to have you come into this. We intentionally called it NC Share because it is about sharing. We know that in North Carolina, we are so fortunate to have MCNC. We are so fortunate to have collaboration, and why not make this an even better and bigger thing? And I just want you all to know that, you know, the first step is kind of understanding what's available to you and also understanding how your faculty may or may not be working around you because they were definitely working around us here at NCCU. So with that, I think you're going to get a little bit more into the weeds with what it is that is being developed here. And so I'm excited to hand it over to Charlie.
Helps if I unmute before I start sharing. So actually, you're now in PowerPoint land. I'm afraid no talking Charlie head. So I'm going to really talk a little bit about what is a Science DMZ, why you should care, and what can you do about the problems that we're going to talk about. If I can go to the next, there we go. So what is a Science DMZ? It's really a network that uses different but still effective methods of inspecting and securing data transfer in that different from your current network. primarily research traffic or education traffic, which often involves really much larger flows. We'll call them elephant flows often because they somewhat come in like a shape of an elephant, where they're a little bit small and then they ramp up and are really big for a while and then tail off. And we've shown on Duke's campus and elsewhere, this concept comes from the Engineering and Science Network from DOE. But how do we get much faster? And we get that. I really want to give you an analogy about what this looks like. So if we think of your network as a train, and we're delivering packets of data instead of people or goods, the faster the train moves, or the bigger the train is, the more stuff you can move around. But if you've got a sort of an express train and a cargo train moving goods and people separately, it's going to be slower than the express train for the goods and services, because you've got to inspect the goods on a regular basis. Every time you cross a border into your campus, you may look at the manifest for the train and decide what's going on. So you say, oh, I've got to inspect all of these things. Where the people, you've already scanned them when they got on, you know who they are, you know where they're going, and so everything is a lot quicker and cleaner. And at the end of the day, that's really what a Science DMZ is. We know that the traffic is going to a particular place, that it's coming from a particular place, and that it's going to be large. And so anytime you start to do something with large amounts of traffic, you can significantly slow down those data flows if there are any sort of security devices, latency introducing devices. Depends on how you want to think about the security devices that are protecting your network. But for example, a 10 gigabit network can drop to 1 gigabit performance levels if you have 25 milliseconds of delay. That's not a small amount of delay, but it's not a huge amount of delay. So if you're doing cloud inspection components on your network or other things like that, where you're doing a round trip out to the cloud and back for things, you can easily introduce 25 millisecond delay. And in fact, in some cases, we've seen delays on Duke's campus for some services like that, which are 150 milliseconds. 10 gigabit networks can also drop down to 3 gigabit performance levels if you have 1% packet loss. And 1% packet loss may sound like a lot, but it's not all that much if you, in an overall sense, but that's a significant drop as well. So if I do a 1 terabyte file transfer, which is on the small side, it used to be big data was a terabyte or more. Now big data is tens of terabytes or hundreds of terabytes at some really high levels. A 10 gigabyte file or a 1 terabyte file traveling over a 10 G network that only performs at 1 gigabit per second takes 150 minutes to transfer versus about 15 minutes at 10 gigabits per second. So how does the Science DMZ fix this? So again, as I said earlier, traffic destined for the Science Engineering Research Network bypasses the firewall. You may say, wait, what about? That's really bad. Why are you going to let my traffic bypass the firewall? And we say, well, we know that it's trusted host. We know where it's coming from, and we know what the general flow is. And we have out-of-band mechanisms that we can use to look at that intrusion detection, where we might slice the data up and look at some particular inspections. But they're also isolated. The other benefit to the campus network is now you're not paying for all of the traffic to be inspected, because these high flows typically are not very interesting for IPSs and IDSs and firewalls, and they essentially, you're paying to process a lot of throughput that you don't need to pay for because it's straightforward flows. The networks themselves are designed and configured to support sustained high-speed flows. They have deep packets or deep buffers on the equipment there. These networks can be shared. In our case, MCNC is the hub of the network. And in the shared Science DMZ, we can put things at MCNC, but we also take advantage of them as a place to add the security layers. So the data can transfer in, we can do the inspections there, and then bring it back to campus. But we also have all of the extra bandwidth between your campus and MCNC that can be taken advantage of this. So if you have a 10 gigabit network connection to MCNC that you're only using part of it, the other part can be used for the Science DMZ flows. The next challenge I'll mention briefly is, how do we make computing easier? How do we provide a wide variety of computing services to faculty, students, and staff? How do we reduce the effort required to use and to set up and maintain? And how do we empower the faculty, staff, and students to build and maintain these tools for themselves? What we've done at Duke over the last number of years is web-based access to compute. So we've containerized a lot of services, and well, that's a fancy way to say we know how to scale up delivery of things like Jupyter notebooks, which make Python and markup and integrations, a lot of machine learning use at Duke, available over the web to any student who wants it, or faculty or staff or research. Our studio was the first thing we did, and that's statistical software with a friendly web interface, and was the first thing we did, and we've been delivering it to all undergraduates and graduate students who take statistics course for the last 7 years. And then a recent one for us at the request of NC Central was WebMO for molecular orbitals, and it's web-based access to computational chemistry tools. Repository tools such as Git, that's a really not friendly word, but it really allows you to automate the process of building the software, customizing the software, doing the integrations and services you need to do so that the faculty member who's teaching a class can actually make that, oh, I made a mistake, I forgot to add something into my course's materials, and they can make the change and publish it right in the 15 minutes or the 5 minutes before the class, rather than having to find the IT guy or the IT person and get that done. And then finally, it's, as Kevin was mentioning earlier, it's federated access. How do you use your home university system to log in? How do you know that one username and password that you protect, that you can have multi-factor on, rather than everybody creating a new password and a new username for you? So this is a quick view of what the container manager looks like for this, and you'll log in, you'll get the kind of container you want, and a simple click on that RStudio or Jupyter link after you've logged in is all that's required to launch it. And it can be specific to a class. You might be in 3 classes who have several different tools that you'll be able to access. Or for your research, you may have a particular set of Jupyter notebooks that you've built and maintained that you want to be able to use. And finally, to end it, this is what an actual screenshot of a student project from this past summer that used some Python and Jupyter notebooks to build visualization tools for GIS data on maps of the US for, I think it was leaking tanks, fuel tanks and the like. And with that, I am done.
Great. Thanks, Charlie. I'll just close up as we get to the top of the hour. A couple minutes, just sort of summarizing the expectations and where we are going forward, and then we'll open up for hopefully 30 minutes or so of good dialogue and question among the group. Appreciate that great overview of Science DMZ and why it's so powerful, and why when researchers need to work with those large data transfers or computational environments, why it's so much easier to use this kind of an environment, and also why it can be difficult to provide individually and separately. So project expectations, there are not a lot, and that's because what we're aiming to do through the shared environment is make this really, really easy for everyone to join into. Just like MCNC has provided services at a service layer, we hope that NC Share will provide similar services riding on top of the MCNC environment. The project itself started in April of this year. So you heard both Davidson and NCCU talk about what they've already been up to, and you heard MCNC talk about having links up already. The project is a 2-year project, so April of 22 through March of 24. The intent in that first year is for us to bring on first our 2 pilot schools, and we're well underway on that. And then starting soon after that, hopefully early in the spring, bring on at least 3 to 5 other institutions over the next 12 to 18 months. But our real goal is to find a way to, as we might say, democratize access to this so that it will be easy for even those who aren't in these first initial groups to be able to access these kinds of services, because we find them extremely powerful and we know they can be hard to set up individually and separately. So 2 years, coming up on halfway through the first year and having our pilots ready to launch. And so starting to really get to this question of who else would be other interested schools to come on board to this project. Part of the support for the project will be what we call communities of practice. We're going to establish teams of researchers and instructors from our campuses and from yours so that they can work together and learn from each other. What are the ins and outs of using virtual machines? What's it really like to do Jupyter? What are the tricks and tips that you have and would share with others who are trying to do similar things to what you do in the classroom or what you do in the research environment? We also intend to have communities of practice around the IT personnel. You heard Charlie talk a little bit about some new containers that we set up for the purpose of what NCCU needed to do in one particular domain. We expect that there are many things we've already done that will be useful to many of you, but also unique tools that you will need. And so the idea is, rather than a tool that 10 people need to use, rather than creating it separately 10 times, let's find a way to work together to create a single image of that, a single virtual machine for that, and make that available to everybody. So that's our intent, with the second community of practice being the technical team. How do we set up VMs? How do we do support approaches? Briefly rounding out our introduction, I will say a little bit about cost, although I will say we don't yet know all the answers about cost. What we do know is the grant is covering the cost of establishing the initial infrastructure. What we also know is that as a fundamental goal, we have sought to make the NC Share environment available as a virtualized infrastructure on top of the connections you already have. So through those two activities, we think that that helps to keep the costs very low for ongoing and sustaining support. And we have modeled ideas for what that might look like and tested them out with our pilot school partners, NCCU and Davidson, and those seem like they are viable approaches. But all remains to be seen once we actually build this out and once MCNC begins supporting it. Beyond costs to participate, we're trying to make the technology aspects, because they're shared, as easy as possible. We recognize that not everyone has the same support teams and personnel that we might have at Duke, or that others of you might have on this call. That's going to be a lot of a variation in that. And so we just want to make the technology as easy to use as a commodity, so to speak, as we can. Likewise, for support through the communities of practice, trying to make that as easy and shared as possible. And so you don't have huge barriers to entry to join this project. The things that are outstanding, I think, and that we haven't quite started on yet, relate to identity management. That's going to be one of the pieces that we have some early experience with and some ideas on, but have not yet fully implemented. So as soon as we get the technology infrastructure in place, we'll start working with NCCU and Davidson on thinking about the federated environment for identity. And the goal will be to keep those two schools as our pilots about 6 to 9 months ahead of the next groups that we bring in. So they're the ones who are test drive, as we've often said in IT, eating our own dog food, but as Tracy, my partner, said in a meeting yesterday, drinking our own champagne first. So whichever way you want to look at it, they're in this at the core to be our test cases, so that we can work out kinks among the other co-PI schools, and then bring them out to all of you, hopefully in a seamless and easy way. So it's 2 o'clock. Let's open up and have some really rich discussion, hear your questions, and hopefully get an idea of which of you might be interested in participating down the road.
Since it's a little quiet, I will share, and Charlie, thank you for highlighting the WebMO, because that is something that came to me over the summer from a faculty member as a result of some of these conversations that we had. And we looked internally trying to figure out, he was sending us lots and lots of information, right? None of it related to licensing or installation, but lots of information that would help other folks, perhaps not us. And we hit a wall, and it just seemed like, okay, we have this new thing, let's at least try it, because we were trying to find the first couple of faculty members to get involved. And so I sent it straight over to Charlie and said, what do you think? Of course, he asked the licensing question, and some of it, unfortunately, it's just not there yet. So that is something that, again, as researchers, as a collaborative, when we identify those softwares that cannot be easily virtualized, that gives us a community to push back on some of that information, right? And say, okay, X vendor, you want students to learn how to use this, you want researchers to use this. We are not just installing it on desktops anymore. So we need to find a solution. You all need to get into the time that is today. But I was really impressed with the ability of Charlie and team to kind of dive into that and help us. And so what I wanted to reiterate is something that Tracy said is we're not just being given fish, if you will, or glasses of champagne, which I actually like even better. We're going to be perhaps given the bottle or even a vineyard maybe, but in the long run, we're going to be able to fend for ourselves, work with our own researchers, and as a community. So if we build this community, you know, Kevin and I are emailing each other back and forth. I'm emailing Charlie. When we build this community, when one of us solves this problem, we're stronger because we have others that are also participating.